Hi there, everyone. Welcome to The Daily Gardener. I'm your host, Jennifer Ebling. It's August 13th. Boy, nasturtiums are such wonderful plants, aren't they? August is a time when your nasturtiums look fabulous after a summer of blooming their hearts out. Right about now, your nasturtiums will bloom better if you remove a few of the center leaves. Opening up the plant a little bit will promote airflow and allow the sun to shine on the base of the plant. You know, nasturtiums are 100% edible. You can add the petals to any salad, just as you would watercress. And you can make a great sandwich with nasturtium flowers and salad dressing. Jane Eddington shared this idea in the Daily News out of New York in 1928. She wrote, "If you have never tried a nasturtium leaf spread with a thin mayonnaise between two thin slices of bread and butter, you do not know how pleasant a little bite you can get from this Indian cress filling." Oh, and before I forget, I found this wonderful article on nasturtiums that was featured in the Hartford Current out of Hartford, Connecticut in August of 1914. It had all of these wonderful recipes for nasturtiums. It not only gave some good advice about nasturtium capers and sandwiches, but also a nasturtium sauce for fish, meat, and vegetables, a nasturtium vinegar, and a nasturtium potato salad. I'll have all of that in today's show notes if you're geeking out on nasturtiums. And here's a little insight into how nasturtiums like to coexist with us. The more we cut nasturtiums to bring them in as cut flowers or to eat them raw or as capers, the more they will bloom. Regular cuttings encourage more lateral development, and you get more flowers. Win-win. And don't forget, if you protect your nasturtiums with a burlap covering or a sheet or something during fall cold snaps, your nasturtiums just might surprise you and bloom well into November. Here's today's brevities. Today in 1750, the botanist Peter Kalm visited Niagara Falls. Niagara was a natural attraction for botanists like Kalm, who studied under Carl Linnaeus. It was actually Linnaeus who came up with the idea to send botanists to Niagara. There are no records of the plants that Kalm collected that day, but it's suspected that Kalm's Labelia and Kalm's St. John's wort were collected there. Both would have been named for him by Carl Linnaeus. And today in 1805, Meriwether Lewis discovered the snowberry, Symphoricarpus albus. I love the story of how Lewis came across the snowberry. He was really looking for the Shoshone Indians, but he found the snowberry instead. Lewis wrote in his journal that he discovered something like a small honeysuckle, except it was bearing a berry as large as a garden pea and as white as wax. The plant was a true discovery to the scientific community, and Lewis showed his botany chops when he said he thought that it resembled a honeysuckle because it is a member of the honeysuckle family. The Latin name is from the Greek, meaning fruits joined together, because the berries are clustered in pairs. The berries aren't good for eating. They're pretty tasteless, but birds and especially grouse love it. Lewis probably took a specimen because some of the seeds made their way to Philadelphia, and they were given to Thomas Jefferson's favorite nurseryman, Bernard McMahon. Then McMahon did what he always did. He grew them and he sent the cuttings to Thomas Jefferson. Jefferson wrote him in October of 1812 saying that the snowberries were thriving in his garden, and he gushed that they were some of the most beautiful berries he had ever seen. And today is the birthday of the Russian botanist Edward August von Regal, who was born on this day in 1815. Regal was born in Switzerland, but he lived most of his life in Russia. Regal worked in a number of botanical gardens, including gardens in Germany and Switzerland. In 1852, he founded the magazine Garten Florawhere, where he described new species that he ran across and encountered. By 1855, Regal made his final move to Saint Petersburg. He oversaw the Imperial Botanical Garden, and he even started a Russian gardening society, as well as a number of journals. Regal was a very hands-on botanist. When he went to St. Petersburg, he immediately set about addressing the setup there and the level of excellence. He changed the way all of the plants were arranged, and he rebuilt the greenhouses, most of which were heated by hot water. Regal loved to arrange plants in groups by geography. For instance, he would have had an area for plants of St. Petersburg, and an area for the plants of Siberia, and then an area for the plants of North America, and so on. And if you're a fan of Curtis's Botanical Magazine, which was started by William Curtis of Kew Gardens, you'll appreciate knowing that volume 111 is dedicated to Edward August van Regal. And today is the birthday of Benedict Roezl, who was born on this day in 1823 in Czechoslovakia. Roezl was probably the most famous collector of orchids during his lifetime, and he had an interesting life as a gardener. He traveled all over Europe, and he was the founder of a Czechoslovakian botanical magazine called Flora. Eventually, Roezl made his way to the United States. He was trying to get to Mexico. After first landing in New York, he went to Denver. There he collected the Yucca angustifolia and the Calicortus. Roezl ended up in Mexico, and for a time he owned a restaurant, but he was also trying to make a business out of growing a nettle that was called Bommeria nivea, which produces a fiber that can be harvested. Roezl was a tinkerer. He had built a machine to extract the fiber from the Bommeria, and he brought the machine to an exhibition. Someone there asked if it would be able to extract fiber from an agave, and when Roezl attempted that, his hand got entangled in the machine and was crushed. The accident changed Roezl's life, and he began collecting plants full-time. He used an iron hook in place of his amputated hand. It made him popular among the locals who brought him plants. Roezl started collecting for Frederick Sander, who was known as the King of Orchids, but it was really Roezl that made it all happen. As a collector, he was a bit of a mess. Still, he collected over 800 orchids from Mexico and South America, along with thousands of other plants like agaves and cacti. And Roezl discovered the tallest and oldest of all cycads, a Colombian orchid known as the Zamia roezlii. And even though Roezl was 6 feet 2 inches tall and had that imposing iron hook for a hand, during his collecting days, he was robbed a total of 17 times and once even attacked by a jaguar. Roezl collected for Sander for 40 years. At the end of his life, he returned to Czechoslovakia. His country welcomed him home, and he was honored by the Russian Tsar. When he died at home in his bed, his funeral was attended by the Austrian Emperor. Today, there's a statue of Roezl in Prague. It's located on the southern end of Charles Square, if you happen to go. And today is the anniversary of the death of the nurseryman and botanist John Gould Veitch, who died on this day in 1870. The Veitch nursery dynasty was a force in the British nursery trade. Their dominance was born out of the idea to hire their own plant hunters to collect exclusively for them. John Gould Veitch became a plant hunter himself. He's remembered for collecting in Japan and Australia, where he once complained that the seeds of many plants were so tiny he didn't know if he was collecting seed or dust. John Gould Veitch's life was cut short by tuberculosis. He died when he was just 31 years old. In Unearthed Words, here's some prose from the Swedish author Tove Jansson from her book, The Summer Book. Every year, the bright Scandinavian summer nights fade without anyone's noticing. One evening in August, you have an errand outdoors, and all of a sudden it's pitch black. It's still summer, but the summer is no longer alive. Today's book recommendation is The Orchid Hunter by Leif Bersweden. The subtitle of the book is A Young Botanist's Search for Happiness. Leif was just 19 years old when he set off on a project to see all 52 species of wild orchid in Britain and Ireland. And he did all of it in one summer as he passed his gap year before going to Oxford University. Bersweden was just 12 years old when he asked his mom about plants, and he's continued to learn about them ever since. In the book, Leif documents his attempt to see and photograph the wild orchids of the UK in a single season. He's a talented writer and a passionate plantsman. I won't spoil it for you. You'll have to read the rest for yourself. The book is funny, enthusiastic, and brilliant. For today's garden chore, add more ground cover. I feel like you could add this to your garden chores throughout the growing season. Carpeting the ground with ground covers is one of the best ways to combat weeds and minimize the amount of work you need to do in your garden. It's also one of the best ways to help your garden feel lived in. The best part about ground covers is often they will do quite well in areas where grass may struggle. Shade-loving ground covers like lily of the valley or ajuga, commonly known as bugleweed, are wonderful options. And wouldn't you rather have a Johnny Jump Up or a sweet violet than some unwanted weed in the garden? Finally, here's something sweet to revive the little botanic spark in your heart. Today, in 1892, the botanist Albert Ruth collected a plant in Sevier County that he thought was a partridge berry. Over 40 years later, this specimen ended up at the University of Tennessee. The year was 1934, and the University of Tennessee's herbarium had been destroyed in a fire, which was especially sad since the herbarium was par excellence and contained over 30,000 specimens. But the botanist and university professor A.J. Sharp rose to the challenge. He put out the call for new specimens, and botanists from all over the country sent them in. Albert Ruth's partridge berry made its way to Dr. Sharp, and when he saw it, Dr. Sharp immediately recognized that the common partridge berry was not the plant that he had been sent. It was obviously mislabeled. Instead, what Sharp was looking at was the twin flower, the flower named for Carl Linnaeus, the Linnea borealis. The twin flower is extremely delicate. Although it can be found in Greenland and Alaska and Scandinavia, it has not been known to be found in the Smoky Mountains, and no one has ever been able to find the spot where Ruth found this twin flower. There have been 2 attempts to locate it, led by Dr. Peter White out of the University of North Carolina. And he cautions anyone attempting a search for it in the Great Smoky Mountains to take heed. He said, there are 2 things you need to botanize there: excellent rock climbing experience and a great life insurance policy. Thanks for listening to The Daily Gardener. And remember, for a happy, healthy life, garden every day. The Daily Gardener is produced weekdays in lovely Maple Grove, Minnesota. You can find complete show notes over at thedailygardener.org, and be sure to share the show with your garden friends. You can find The Daily Gardener on all your favorite social media: Instagram, Twitter, and Pinterest, and of course, Facebook. While you're over at Facebook, don't forget to join the Daily Gardener community. Just search for these 3 words, Daily Gardener Community. The group will pop right up, and then request to join. Finally, I want to thank my team at Podfly Productions, where my fabulous editor is Eric Begay. Have a great day in the garden, and we'll see you tomorrow.